Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's workshop. I am Naisha, super excited to have you all together with us today. And we are here for a wonderful workshop with Jordan A. Madison. She is a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist and certified yoga instructor. She owns and practices at Therapy is My Jam, LLC, a private practice that helps individuals and couples heal from their past to understand their present and create the future that they desire. She is Prepare Enriched certified as well as EMDR certified as well. Since completing her 200-hour yoga instruction certification, she has begun hosting mental health workshops in her community. She received her bachelor's in psychology from Spelman College and MS in couple and family therapy from the University of Maryland. She is also the author of the CBT Journal for Mental Health, which includes the JAM Method, a journal for prompts, affirmations, and mindfulness exercises. And I'd love to share, outside of being a therapist, she's a blog writer for Therapy for Black Girls and the co-founder of the JAM Planner, a digital planner that assists users with being more productive while also prioritizing self-care. Now we're just going to jump right in. Jordan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back.
Okay.
I'll go share my screen.
Mhm.
Let's see if it's letting me. Oh, there we go. And we can hop one in. Let's see. Okay. Move this over. Well, hello everyone. I hope that you all are having a great night. I have a few things planned for us. Some things are focusing on the JAM method. It'll be some journal prompts, some ways that you can affirm yourself and your partner, and then also some mindfulness, but also providing some psychoeducation around like ways to communicate in a healthy way, but also, asking you all for feedback, ideas, thoughts on maybe what gets in the way of communication or, certain things that maybe help you build intimacy versus not. So hopefully this is interactive. And if you feel safe or comfortable, you can put comments in the chat or you can take yourself off mute and join in the conversation. I'm going to introduce myself, which I don't really need to do anymore because you did a great job of reading my bio. And then I'll talk about just common issues that we see in communication, what to communicate, how to communicate it, and then I'm providing you all with some resources. I've also sent some PDFs, so you guys should be able to have access to those things that I talk about at the end of session. I say session, I mean, at the end of the workshop as well. So, like you all have already heard, I'm a marriage and family therapist, yoga instructor, all the things. Yoga instructor is fairly new. I just became a yoga instructor in March. So I've been excited about that and trying to just, host more events and do things outside of seeing clients one-on-one, because while I love that work, I would like to help more people, but there's only so many clients I can have without being burnt out or overwhelmed. So I've been hosting these workshops and I'm excited to be here with you all to do the same. Okay, so a few questions that I had, don't have to answer them all at once, don't have to share if you don't feel comfortable, but you can either write it in the chat or if you have a journal or anything to write next to you or near you, grabbing that, because maybe this might be a question that you jot down some stuff and you revisit it after we're done, or this can be a way that you, further do some self-reflection. But my first question was just, what does intimacy mean to people, right? For some people, when we hear intimacy, we automatically think sex. For other people, it doesn't have to be that, right? It can be someone knowing who I am and all the things about me. I know I've heard a lot of people say the whole like into me I see piece, where you feel seen and you feel heard by someone. Oh, peace, comfort. I love that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Um, I'll keep the chat open just to see any other ideas. And if anyone else would like to share, feel free to join in. Special connection with the person. Okay, nice. I also think sometimes when we hear intimacy, we assume it's romantic, but these definitions that you all are sharing in the chat is a reminder that intimacy can be with friends, it can be with yourself, you know, it can be just like feeling that peace and comfort, maybe whether it's in the sanctuary of your home and how you've decorated your space, whether it's a person that makes you feel like you can be yourself and not be judged, safe, closeness, all of those things. It's really important. And another thing that to me comes with intimacy is that vulnerability piece, right? To feel at peace with someone, to feel comfortable, to feel safe. Sometimes those words can also equal like vulnerability. And that can be hard, you know, especially when it comes to communicating our needs. So my next question is, who do you find it easy to communicate with? And you don't have to put their actual names or anything in the chat, but it can be like my brother or my mom or my partner, or, you know, it doesn't have to be literal names, but just who in your world, right, in your day to day, maybe, or maybe you don't speak to them every single day, but when you do, it's like easy to communicate with. Okay, okay, I'm seeing best friends. I'm seeing our sister circle. Nice. Oh, it's easy to communicate with people who are willing. I love that. If you are operating in good faith, you can get through hard conversations. That was good. Okay, I love that. And so I imagine the people that it's easy to communicate with, they also feel safe. They also feel like you can talk to them without judgment. Who do you find it difficult to communicate with? And again, it can be my brother. I don't know why I keep saying brother today. I think because I had two clients that was talking about their brothers today. But you know, oh, I like that. Like a general definition of like anyone who has made up their mind about who you are. So there's no open-mindedness to who you show up to be, right? Because sometimes we're not always in the same mindset, or we're not always showing up all the time. Supervisors who are jealous. Okay, can understand that for sure. Family, I figure some people might say that, right? Because the assumption is, oh, it's family, like those people you probably known the longest or whatever, but sometimes our family can be judgmental, or they're who raised us, so they have expectations that they put on us, where it can be scary to communicate, I don't want to do this, or this doesn't work for me, or whatever the case may be. So I can definitely understand that. Those who are unwilling, okay, that's fair too, right? Because sometimes you might be willing to communicate, but that's the hard part about communication, is there's the speaking, but then there's also the listening and the comprehension piece, right? And then someone also communicating back to you. So if you're doing all the, I put right in air quotes because I don't think that there's like always a set, like if you do this, then you won't be single, or then you'll always communicate or whatever. No. But you can be doing all the self-regulation and communication, but if someone else is not in that headspace or cannot receive it, then that can be really difficult. Someone said people who aren't open to being vulnerable. Yep. Or people trying to continue generational curses. And I think that's fair too, because sometimes generational curses are, or patterns, maybe they're not always curses, are the status quo. So to change that would be like, whoa, what are you doing? You're like messing up the family, you know, or sometimes the status quo is we don't talk about it. So to communicate about it is scary or intense. And I appreciate someone else sharing, like people that don't see me, right? That's really important, because sometimes people have these ideas of you. And if you're trying to communicate, like, no, this is actually where I'm at, or this is how I'm really feeling, and they have their mindset on who you are or how they see you, then that can be really difficult. Okay. Thank you all for sharing and for putting those comments in the chat and really engaging. My last question for now is, what do you hope to receive from this workshop? I have things scheduled and planned, of course, but I just want to make sure that I'm aligning with, um, you know, what you guys are hoping to receive. I hope to learn what has worked for others in building trust through communication. Okay. That's actually a really good point, right? Like learning from others too, because this is what this space is for. I'm presenting, yes, but I'm not the expert in all things, right? And so people are more than welcome to jump in and be like, oh, I tried that before. That actually worked with me and my partner, or oh, they hated when I did that, or whatever the case may be. So I like that. Affirmations to help me communicate clearly with myself, which will help external conversations. I love that. Love that a lot. Okay. So I will move on to the next point. So as a couple and family therapist, I mainly work with couples and individuals, not really families, but as a therapist, I see some common issues in relationships. And if you notice, I say relationships, so it's not always couples. Relationships can be family as well. Um, or friendships. I haven't had friendship therapy, but I know that there have been people, I've heard of some people who have like definitely gone to therapy with their friend. But yeah, common issues in relationships are typically finances, parenting differences, family slash friend slash cultural differences that can look like religion, that can look like expectations of how we handle family members who need something, that can look like someone who's really social and has a lot of friends and line sisters and on, I don't know, committees and stuff, and someone else who's just like, I was the only child, I like to be by myself. Like sometimes those can cause some rifts. Intimacy and sex are typically some issues that come up, whether it's differences in like what are our expectations around sex or how often we would like to have it, whether it's trauma from past experiences and you're trying to navigate that in your current relationship. Infidelity has definitely come up. And then also external stressors for each individual. Because as humans, we are constantly going through our own internal experiences. As Black women, we're already going through our own experiences that sometimes our partners may or may not understand. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but just external stresses can weigh on a relationship. Your partner might be going through something that has nothing to do with you, but they're coming home and they're in a bad mood. And so then it impacts the relationship because then it's like, oh, why are you talking to me like that? I didn't do nothing to you. And then, some of those things can definitely impact the relationship or how smooth it's going. But also, in my opinion, a lot of these issues stem from difficulties with communication. A lot of times couples will fill out my intake form or fill out, what is it that you're looking for in therapy or what do you need help with? And everyone says communication, which is like the blanket statement, but it's a lot of topics that they're not communicating about. Finances are really big, because one, I mean, we live in a very capitalistic society, so I feel like everything is tied to like, how much do you make? What's going on, like, what's your net worth, and that ties to your self-worth sometimes, not for everyone, but in your mind it can. Or it's this idea of like, oh, I'm 30, I should be here. Oh, I'm 40, I should be here. Like there's this idea of where stuff is or where you should be. And a lot of it is related to finances or what you should be able to afford, or if you have a home or whatever the case may be. And I've seen that cause some problems, even in just individual sessions. And then in couples, I've been seeing a lot of money sometimes equates to power or control. Even if we don't intend for it to, it does. And so sometimes if the woman partner is the breadwinner, that can be really difficult for, in heterosexual relationships at least, it can be very difficult for the man to handle that. And that has caused some tension in others, or a lot of times I've seen people allow gender roles to impact what's going on, when in reality it can be like, who is good at what, and let's do it that way, versus, oh, like you're supposed to do this because of that. So those are some things that I've definitely seen, where I think communication definitely could alleviate some of those things, because then you could talk about what are your expectations, or when it comes to finances, how do we want to split X, Y, and Z? How were you raised as a child? What are things that you think are important or that we want to instill in our child? Like all of those things can be things that we talk about and communicate. So I was reading this article the other day that talked about African American couples when it comes to help seeking and how they see, if they seek out couple and family therapy. I was reading it for this other presentation I was doing, and I found it to be really, really interesting, because it makes me think of how often we sometimes, why it might be difficult to get in the way of communication. And so while that article was about how these things get in the way of help seeking, I think that there's still very fair points. So one of the reasons it says was lack of positive modeling. And so if you think about it, there's no class around communication. There's no, you don't learn in high school or college how to express your needs or how to talk to your partner. Like, choosing a partner is one of the most important decisions you can ever make in your life, in my opinion, at least. And there's no class around like how to do that or what to look for or what's important or conversations to have. We don't get lessons around communication. And so we learn about communication from what we see. If I were to ask you, you know, what did your parents show you about communication, or how did you see your parents or your caregivers, maybe if it wasn't your parents, how did you see your caregivers communicate, right? You might say, oh, I mean, maybe they communicate well, or I don't know, they didn't talk about stuff in front of us because we were kids and we were supposed to, you know, be seen and not heard. Or it's another thing I've heard. They didn't really talk about it, you know, you just prayed about it and, you know, that's it, right? And so oftentimes we're not seeing positive examples of actually communicating through problems. There's a lot of yelling and fighting, or I didn't see my parents argue at all, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening, you know? And so that doesn't, I know maybe some parents feel like, oh, we shouldn't do X, Y, and Z in front of the kids. But sometimes having healthy disagreements can be helpful because it can teach your children that like you may not always agree, or you may not always see eye to eye with someone, but that doesn't mean that you can't still have a relationship with them and that you still can't communicate with them and find a middle ground. So lack of positive modeling is one way that I personally think sometimes gets in the way of communication. Second thing I would say is this being socialized to suffer in silence. Between the, we as Black women get the superwoman schema of like, I gotta be strong, independent, I gotta do it on myself. I could do it. If I don't do it, who else will? I gotta, if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. All the things that we hear. And I also feel like for Black men, they receive a lot of like the toxic masculinity piece of like, you're not supposed to express your emotions, man up, toughen up, like, why are you crying over X, Y, and Z? Or, you know, you're not supposed to speak about on how you feel. Like, they're not social, it's not acceptable for them to have other emotions outside of like either you're happy or you're angry, right? If a man is seen as sad, it's like, what's wrong with you, right? To be fair, I think as Black women, we give ourselves a little bit more grace when we're around each other. I think we allow ourselves to feel the emotions and feel sadness, or show it, but oftentimes we also feel like I have to man up, I have to toughen up, I can't let someone see me down, they want to see me like this, I have to put on a brave face, right? I think a lot of that stems from, you know, growing up, it's kind of like we were taught, well, life is not going to be kind to you, like, we're Black in America, you just have to like suck it up. And that doesn't mean that you can't have emotions or that you don't feel things, you know? Sorry, I'm just checking the chat because I finally was able to click it open. Definitely didn't experience positive modeling, like the pressure to be the best communicator, which sometimes I didn't allow myself either way. So, and to me, that kind of goes into what I was going to say next with this gender roles piece, right? Because I think there are sometimes expectations pertaining to gender around like, well, women are supposed to be the nurturers and the lovers, and y'all know how to communicate, men don't. And so we either give them a pass and we don't hold them accountable, or sometimes there's that it backfires because we're expected to do that. If we're not perfect at communicating, if we don't share our emotions in the healthiest way, then it's like, oh, like, what's wrong with you? You're doing it wrong. When in reality, we're also human and we have raw emotions too. And sometimes we don't have the words or we can't always articulate it. And that's not even just a women thing. I think that's just in general, right? I don't think that men get the same socialization of like, how do you feel? The way that sometimes we at least did by our peers. Because I mean, if I was to think of an example of, you know, if I go through a breakup or if I'm sad or something, I would probably call a friend and like watch TV on the couch and cuddle up and like cry, right, in their arms. I don't know if men are gonna do that, right? Because that doesn't feel as the norm for them. It's like, oh, well, we'll like maybe go talk about or go out, you know, and drink or talk about it or whatever the case may be. And obviously every single person is very different. So some people have different coping mechanisms. So I'm not saying all men or all women do that, but I do think there is this expectation around women being the better communicators. And so because there's that expectation, sometimes you might not communicate well. And that's not because like, oh, well, you're doing something wrong. It's like I haven't learned those skills yet. And sometimes communication, nurturing, empathy, those are not masculine versus feminine ideals. Those are human things that we all need to know how to do. But I think it's just unfair that, you know, there's certain expectations that are put on us. Stop crying before I give you something to cry about was always a big one, for sure. I was talking to another client about like, my dad would like do something maybe jokingly, right? And then I'm like, ow, he's like, stop, that ain't hurt. And it's like, how are you gonna tell me that didn't hurt, right? Or like I'll watch him do that with my siblings still, because I'm drastically older than my siblings. So when I come home and I like visit, I'm like, how are you gonna tell him what hurt his feelings? Like, you can't do, you know? So it's just stuff that I've noticed where it's like it's been the norm for so long in our culture and our families, you know, that we don't think about it. And when if you really do think about it though, I think a lot of times it was our own parents or caregivers' discomfort with our emotions, right? They weren't good with sitting with emotions. They probably didn't want to see us cry. So it was like, stop all of that, right? Before I actually give you a reason. So I think that's some of like people, we have to learn to self-regulate better. I also think some of it is like we're not comfortable sitting with emotions. And that's why I think therapy is helpful. Because if you are crying and you go to your friend about something, your friend is going to try to cheer you up and make you feel better, which isn't a bad thing, right? But sometimes there's things that you won't be happy about in an hour. And you might just need to sit in it and have someone sit with you, whether it's in grief, whether it's in sadness, whether it's in you're in a bad mood. And I'm not saying it to say like, well, misery loves company and just be miserable with the person, but sometimes we need to hold space for how that person is feeling without trying to change it. And I feel like when we're kids and we cry, our parents are like, oh, it's okay, cheer up. You want ice cream? You want, like, people are trying to constantly cheer us up. So we never really learn how to just sit with, I'm having a bad day today, and that's okay. And I just need to like express I'm having a bad day and then move on with my day. Like I'll sit in it or I'll go do something on my own that makes me happy. Like today was not one of my favorite days. It was very gloomy in DC. I have not seen the sun since like Sunday. I'm very over it. So I was not in the greatest mood, but I lit some candles. I was like, oh, like what's gonna cheer me up? What's gonna actually make me feel good, right? Other days, if I'm in a bad mood, I'm just like, today's not the day. That's fine. You haven't had a bad day in a while. Let's sit in it. You don't have to do anything to cheer yourself up. But I think it's important to know and check in with your emotions, because then you're able to communicate with others. Sorry, reading the chat. I think that pushed me to hold off on crying. Yeah, see, I do feel like a lot of times people think that crying is not useful. Not me, I cry all the time. I'm pretty sure I cried today. But I can see that completely, right? And to me, this may be a reach, but I blame everything on capitalism and slavery. And I assume that like a lot of that was our ancestors couldn't cry. Like crying didn't solve anything, right? If your child was literally ripped away from you and taken away from you, you could cry all you want, but that child was not coming back. And you were still expected to go on the field the next day. And while, yes, slavery was hundreds of years ago, that's really not that far, right? Like that's not that far at all. I know I want to say my grandpa's grandma was a slave or the child of a slave, either way, right? Like that's not that far. Like my grandpa is still alive, I still can talk to him. So if his grandma was experiencing those things, you know, people think like, oh, we're so removed, but you have to realize I would say it is intergenerational trauma, but like when you think of all the people who experienced those horrific, awful experiences of slavery, and then it ended, there was never any like rehabilitation. There was never any like, oh my God, y'all went through this horrible thing. Like, no one was talking about mental health back then. And it was kind of like, okay, this is how I was raised. You couldn't cry to survive, right? To survive, you had to put on a face, get the work done, because if you cried, you might have got beat more. Or if you cried, that wasn't going to solve anything. And so I feel like we've just been continuing to teach our children or the next generations things that maybe helped us back then, but it's not serving us now, right? Not crying. Crying may not change anything, but it might feel like a release, and it might feel really good to just get out, or it might be this lets someone know that I'm not okay. And everyone keeps thinking that I'm strong, but like I need moments where I can be soft, right? I think we have these expectations of always being strong, and that can be really heavy to carry. It makes me think of, I know I'm going on a tangent, but it makes me think of, I don't know if you guys have seen Encanto. It's a Disney movie. Love that movie. But there's a song called Surface Pressure. When that movie first came out, I promise you, I played that scene for clients like on the computer because it's such a good visual of how a lot of us feel, especially in our families, and especially if you're like the oldest daughter. There's this expectation of like you just have to suck it up. All these things, like you can carry it. Yeah. My exes have thought they wanted sex, but they wanted to talk about how they felt and cuddle. I could see that, right? I think a lot of times there are people where sex is not just a physical thing, it can be their way of connection. But then they can also misconstrue it with like, well, this is what I'm expected to want. But in reality, if you don't have sex, but you just held me and like I was the little spoon or something, people probably want that too, like it's not always just like the physical act of sex. I think people are wanting that closeness, that literal nakedness of like being with someone, but just being held and like talking about what's on their mind. I've had plenty of people where they're like, oh, I don't really know if therapy is going to be helpful. And then we have a first session and they are just chatting. And it's just like, you needed that release. I didn't have to say much. And that's just the first session. But I think it's just the holding space of like, I get to talk, no one's interrupting me. I get to like process through these feelings without feeling like I should do this or it has to be this way. So yeah, I think a lot of people do just want to talk about their feelings more than they realize. They've got more practice of hurting and harming. Yeah, healing and helping versus hurting and harming. I think that's also, to me, that also goes to socialization because a lot of people think, not people think, I think conflict resolution looks different for different genders. And as a little girl, if you were in something, it's like, oh, did you talk it out? Whereas for boys, it was like, are you gonna like? There was typically fights, right? Not the girls didn't fight. Don't get me wrong, and not the boys can't talk things out. But I think the socialization is around like this is how you handle conflict. You either like you have to toughen up, you have to show them how bad you are, that you're not gonna take so and so. And so there has to be more space for healing and like actually talking through things. And I think a lot of people in general just feel really defensive around like how they operate. And so sometimes they're not seeing someone trying to help as help. They're seeing it as like, you're attacking me, you think I'm doing this wrong. And so we have to just like move with more compassion towards each other all around, I would say. Yeah. Sorry, just trying to catch up in the chat. Desexualizing me in some ways. The intimacy we shared through communication was something not allowed as a romantic couple. And that's why my first question was like, what is your definition of intimacy, right? Because I think people assume that it's sex and romance and communication is a part of intimacy. And you can have that being able to talk to someone. I mean, I don't know, I'm single, so what do I know? But I would assume that like being able to talk to someone that feels like a friend and they feel like a friend and it's a safe space and also a lover and I'm attracted to them, that's the ideal package, right? And so I think some people get confused because some people look at it as very black and white, like romance or my partner is sex and this, but like a friend or someone like my partner wouldn't understand me if I share these things. So I think that can be really, really damaging in like how we're viewing intimacy. My grandfather's grandmother was stolen from Angola at age 9. Yeah, see, like if that is not far away at all. Okay, someone else loves Encanto. Okay, great. Thank you for putting the link in the chat. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was playing that all the time. And I find that males are not socialized to talk deeply to romantic partners. Mm. Mm. And so that one I see twofold. I see it as like they're not socialized to talk deeply to romantic partners, but I've also seen some romantic partners be like, why are you telling me this? Like, man up, right? So there's times where we might complain about how men are socialized, or not even just men, but how we both might, or both genders might be socialized, not realizing that we may sometimes feed into the socialization of it. Because I'm sure there have also been, if you're saying you had a lot of male friends back in the day who told you things that they wouldn't talk to their girlfriends about, that could have been because they were scared or because you were more of a safe space, or it could have been they tried to talk to their girlfriend and the girlfriend was like, why are you telling me this? Man up, right? And not saying they use those exact words, but like possibilities of like, we don't know how people always react. And so sometimes I've seen people try to make attempts to do better, but then they're met with the same reactions or the same things that just continue the cycle. So I do hope it's shifting though. Yeah, understandable. I do hope it's shifting though. And I do think sometimes, I mean, I've been seeing, I don't know, sometimes it feels like gender wars when I'm on social media, so I can't call it, but I do think that there are sometimes moments where I see it shifting for sure. So, these are a few quizzes, practices, things that I think are helpful to explore your own view so that you can then express your needs and what you're needing. In the folder that I provided, that I sent Naisha, you all will have access to. It has some of these quizzes, not from the actual websites though. Most of the things I got were from Therapist Aid, which is a really great website, not just for therapists, but if you want some worksheets or other things to look into, it's really helpful. But the 5 love languages, I think people typically know what they are. But just in case you don't, it's physical touch, acts of service, gifts, quality time, and words of affirmation are the 5 love languages. I like to tell people to take the 5 languages quiz, not every day, but like, um, maybe every year or so, right? Like just to see, because you'd be surprised how sometimes your love languages may shift, right? I always give the example of like right now, acts of service is not big on my love languages, but maybe that's because I'm single and because I live alone, and what other responsibilities do I have except myself? Versus when I'm a mom, I probably would love someone to just come over and handle some stuff or do what I need to be done. So I think it also depends on like the stage of life that you're in. Twice a year is needed. Yeah, I love that, right? I think that's great to just check in. Or it could sometimes show you what you might be craving from your relationship, right? Because maybe, I don't know, physical touch was not high on your list typically, but in the past month or so, you've really been craving it, so it moves up, right? It can just be somewhere, a way that you explore, and just sharing it with your partner so that you know where they're at, how theirs is changing too, and how you guys can both like meet those needs. I would also consider when you take it, or at like, not to take it twice, but to notice that how you give love and how you receive love may be different. Um, some people may give love through gifts, right? But they receive it through words of affirmation, right? Or, it just really depends. I'm just trying to give examples, but just to keep that in mind. Second is attachment style. I've always been obsessed with attachment styles. I always recommend the book Attached by Amir, I think his name was like Amir Levin or Levine. It was a really great book. It says attached on the cover and it's white and red. Because it helps you to understand like how you're showing up in relationships. And then also there's like a quiz for yourself. There's also a quiz for your partner. If you have one or it'll say like, even if you're single, think of the last relationship that you were in And so it could just really help me think of like, how am I showing up? What are my needs? What needs to be met? When do I feel secure in a relationship? So yeah. Genogram is a fancy word for family tree. I use them a lot in sessions. I think it's cool to use because you can explore relationships. Again, I should have added the images to the PDFs that I added, so my apologies. But you can kind of map out your family, and then I like to notice like, how did you see communication in between your mom and dad, or between whoever you were raised by, right? What relationships did you see as a kid that you looked up to, right? Um, who did you turn to when you were having a bad day? Like, just to map out the family, but then to map out like, who were you close to? Where was their tension? What patterns do you notice, right? If I were to do my own genogram, I mean, I know my parents had me out of wedlock. I know that my grandpa had someone out of wedlock before he married my grandma. Like, so that might be a pattern I noticed, right? That might be a negative one to someone. I also noticed that like education was really big. So let's say I'm not a first generation college student. Education has been big in my family, right? And I ask people, what are some patterns in your family that you want to repeat, that maybe you saw value in, versus what are patterns that you don't, right? But you can also notice like, how did I see my mother deal with partners, right? Maybe my parents weren't together and my mom had partners that were not healthy. Maybe I saw my stepdad, you know, be a really great bonus dad and step in. I don't know. Like, just to really think about like, how did I see relationships, right? Did I see loving relationships? Did I see things that made me feel like, oh, okay, I'm safe? Was I around a lot of tension, you know? And that way you can express to your partner, because a lot of times when you're marrying someone or in relationship with someone, you're in relationship with their family, right? You might notice the role that you play in your family versus the role they play in theirs, right? You may be the baby of the family and you're spoiled and everyone's like, oh, let me make sure that you have what you need. And your partner might have been the eldest daughter and she's like always responsible for stuff, right? And so how you two are going to come into a household might look a little different. You might feel like, oh, okay, well, it'll get done because it always got done in my household. I don't know, I didn't have to do it. And your partner might feel like I have to do everything because growing up, I always had to do everything and I don't want to perpetuate that, right? And so just understanding each other's family and the roles that you all play in your own families, and then how, when you're creating your own family, what you want that to look like would be helpful. And then last but not least, I called it Money Habitudes because that is a game. It's a card deck that you can play. I used to use it when at one of my old jobs. And I've always told people about it as a resource. But the document that I did send attached, it's like a worksheet around like, where are you at when it comes to like spending and your spending habits. Money habitudes are like your habits and attitudes. So the card deck has like maybe 52 cards, or maybe not 52, I can't remember how many, but there you can put like, that's me, that's not me, or sometimes it depends, and just notice like, what are the habits that you notice are definitely you. And the different habitudes are like planning, which means money helps me like to achieve my goals, security, which can be money helps me feel safe, gifts, or not gifts, giving is one where it's like money helps me to feel like liked or loved by others. Status is one, money helps me to feel like, I can't remember the actual term for it, but taking back money helps me to feel like, you know, I got it going on. Carefree, which is like money helps me to, like, I don't worry about money, right? Or spontaneous, that's the last one. Like money helps me to enjoy life. So looking at that could be helpful too, because you and your partner may have different spending habits. I have a couple where one is very much content with where they are. And it's like, we got the 2 kids, we have this house, I'm making enough money where the bills are paid, I don't need much else. And his wife is like, I want to be making 6 figures and I want our kids to do this and I want us to go on trip. Neither one of them are wrong, right? But it's just different. And how do we find the middle ground? So it's something to just think about, you know. And money is one of the leading causes of divorce. And I think divorces are very, very expensive. So I think, understanding your thoughts and behaviors around money for your own self and then understanding your partners could be really helpful. Sorry, reading the chat. Back on the love language, I found that some people have gotten the love language thing mixed up. Some people think that if they receive love a certain kind of way, they perform that kind of love for others. Yeah, I see that a lot with my parents, like my dad and stepmom. He's big on physical touch or like words of affirmation, but she's not. And so like trying to give her hugs or trying to like speak life into her, while that might be helpful, that's not necessarily how she's perceiving it as love. For her, she might need you to like go in there and wash the dishes or, take something off her plate. So I think that's very, very fair that people assume how I give it is how my partner should receive it. When in reality, your partner may not receive it that way. Or so for someone else, acts of service might not be a love language. You might be like, that's not like that's what you're supposed to do. I don't feel loved because you wash the dishes, you live in the house. What are you doing? So for them, it might be like words of affirmation or quality time. So I think that's a very, very fair point. So here are a few healthy communication techniques. I'm going to say these and go over them. And then I appreciated, I think it was Jaleesa that was sharing, wanting to hear like what has worked for other people. So I'm going to share some of these. If you have tried them, if you find it helpful, please put it in the chat. If you feel like, I tried this and it still didn't work, put that in the chat too. I would love to hear from you all. So healthy communication techniques. And like I said, this is a major key for any relationship, whether it's romantic, platonic, family, a neighbor, whatever, is communicating. So the first one I would say is soft startup, which is starting the conversation with something positive and focusing on the strengths of the relationship. I've had some people be like, that feels like sugarcoating. I don't like it. Fair, but it also makes me think of like, how can you express yourself where it's going to be received in the best way? Because you can be very angry and your anger is valid. I'm not saying that when you're angry, you need to be like, hey, babe, I love you so much. You can say, I don't know, I really appreciate how hard you've been working for the family. And while I appreciate that, I noticed that since you've been working so much, you haven't been home as much. And that's leading me to do more of the chores, and that's making me feel overwhelmed. That sounds very different than you're never here. Why haven't you done X, Y, and Z? Because when you start with that, your partner's going to be like, oh, hold on. Like they're not going to feel appreciated. They're going to feel like you're just yelling at them or attacking them. And then they're not going to be receptive or hear you because now they're in defense mode. And then no one's hearing each other. So my point when I say the startup, it's not about sugarcoating and like pacifying the person. It's more about how can you maybe see or acknowledge some of their efforts and start with something positive and then add like and still put in what you need of like this isn't working for me or like this is how it's making me feel. Second part is using the I statements to take ownership of how you feel. So again, I feel very overwhelmed and uncared for sounds very different than you never do anything around the house and you just lay on the couch all day and I can't stand you. Like that sounds very different, right? Because you don't love me anymore versus I feel alone and it's kind of making me scared. Sounds very different. When you say you don't love me anymore, your friends gonna be like, what are you talking about? Of course I love you, right? They're gonna come back versus I feel alone or I feel uncared for. They can't say no, you don't. I mean, I guess they could, but like they can't say no, you don't, because how like they don't know your feelings, right? You're taking ownership of how you feel and you're avoiding the blame piece and you're just sharing like this is where I'm at and this is what's going on for me. Third, be gentle when speaking and practice compassion for your partner. I know that's much easier said than done. I don't expect everyone to just be like gently speaking all the time, even when angry. I think sometimes you might need to be assertive, right? You might need to be like, I don't like this. This is pissing me off. You can still do that and say that without cursing your partner out or being disrespectful, right? The practicing compassion piece, right? I think that is really important because I think with partners, they not even just partners actually, because I'll give a personal example. Like I feel like with people, there's a lot of tit for tats. So I was talking to my best friend the other day, and I was like, I so see why parents start like blaming each other. Like, "Well, I did this for the kid. Well, you don't do this. I did all of this," because I make a joke that like my grandma feels like my toddler. Um, and that is me and my mom's kid. Like she lives with my mom, she takes care of her. But 2 weeks ago, I brought my grandma down with me to give my mom a break. But once I was with my grandma the whole week, um, she went back to New York. My mom's calling me. She, she's overwhelmed and stressed with whatever she has going on. Fair, understandable. My mom has a very stressful job. I get all of that. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, but I just had her one on like all by myself for the week. I got a job too. You don't think I'm tired? Like I didn't say those things, of course, but in my mind, it's not always just with the romantic partner. It's very easy to just like lose the compassion or be so focused on your own pain or your own frustration or your own overwhelmed feelings, whatever, that you don't realize that like someone else is also probably feeling that way too. And so how can we not take things so personally, right? How can we not make it, oh, my partner is saying I'm a bad dad because they need more help? No, they need more help. They're not saying that you're bad at parenting. They're saying I need you to do more. That doesn't mean that you're not doing anything, right? Two things can exist at the same time. So that compassion part is really important. Listen to comprehend, not just to respond. That's a hard one. Avoid interrupting each other. I know that I definitely have been guilty of being like, oh, but, or like interrupting. And so it can be really hard to catch yourself, to allow your partner to speak and really just hear them. Like be present in the moment, not think about what you're going to say next or how you're going to get them or, the other thing they did last week that you forgot to bring up. Just focusing on being in the present moment of like hearing what they're saying. Okay, I'll read that one second. And then minimizing distractions when having serious conversations is a big one. It can be hard. I think that I do really great at multitasking. I talk to people all day. I have to write notes. I do it, right? But I can understand how if I'm having a serious conversation with somebody, but then I'm looking at my phone and trying to respond to this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, like I can still respond, but does it feel like they're getting my full attention? No, maybe not, right? And so minimizing the distractions can be really helpful. And then last but not least, the scheduling check-ins with your partner. I know for some people that might feel like corny or like homework or like it should be organic, we shouldn't have to schedule it, whatever the case may be. But I think having, and it doesn't have to be every single day, maybe it could be once a week, maybe it could be once a month, whatever, but just checking in on like, how have you been feeling about our relationship? Do you feel heard? Do you feel loved? Anything that you're needing from me? Vice versa. This is what I've been needing from you. This is what I've been noticing. I appreciated that you did this thing. The check-ins don't always have to be here are all the problems that we had this past week. They can be like, I really appreciated when you brought me a grilled cheese sandwich in bed because I was really hungry and I didn't feel like getting up. Thank you for that. Like it doesn't always have to be negative things, right? The check-ins can be, I'm seeing positive things. Okay, go into the chat. I love these. For me, it can be very challenging to not let how I feel, especially when things happen unexpectedly, care over for my partner and loved ones. Same. And before seeing your comment, Naisha, I was gonna say to me, the first thing that comes up is like the emotional regulation, right? I think it can be hard when you have a partner and children and something happened for the day to immediately be like, oh, I need a moment, right? Because sometimes they don't give you a moment when you come home from work. So you might snap, you might be like, do it yourself. I don't know, right? But I think taking the moment to just say, you know what? I need a second to decompress. For a lot of people, that second to decompress was the drive home. For a lot of people now, since COVID, things are virtual, right? Or maybe sometimes people have hybrid, I don't know. But you're not always getting that second to decompress. And so you might react to someone or might be frustrated. And to be fair, I think it's human sometimes that you take stuff out on other people. I'm not saying, oh, you should do it, but I'm saying that when it happens, recognize it and then communicate that. You know what? Yesterday I realized that I was really short with you. I apologize. I was having a bad day. It had nothing to do with you. You didn't really deserve that, but like, I just needed a moment. And maybe moving forward, when I get home from work, maybe we could have a word or just time where we each get 30 minutes. I don't know, right? Like something where it's like, I noticed that I snapped at you. I apologize. This is what was happening for me. Here's what we can do next time, because I don't want it to happen again. I don't want it to keep happening, but I also know that I'm human and I'm going to be upset some days at work or with my family or with whatever. And so what are things that we can do or put in place so that we're not snapping on each other each time? Because I always say to couples, I don't expect you to never argue. That's just not realistic. To me, what's important is like, what's the repair? How do we come back from an argument? What does it look like? How do we get back to like our baseline? Um, so yeah. People definitely do push past the I need a minute boundary. Because again, so for some people it's like, well, we gotta talk about this now, because they're in a moment of like, I see that you're mad or I'm mad, but I need to talk about it. And then I respect them that you might just need the space. They might not be doing too well at their own self-regulation, right? It might be some anxiety that's coming up for them. If I'm not talking about it right now, then how are we gonna fix it? And they might need to learn to self-soothe as well. As a parent, we have to schedule a lot. Talking about bills, talk about the schedule and scheduling sex. And that's, I think, is really important too, right? Because I've heard people be like, it's sex, like sex should be passionate or spontaneous or whatever. And it's like, well, you both are working and exhausted and you got kids, like it's not always feeling passionate or spontaneous, right? And so my comeback, or what I typically tell people, is like the same way that you would put something on your calendar or schedule it to show intentionality, schedule it to show like, this is important to me, let me make sure I don't forget. The same way you can do that for your partner or for your self-care, right? It might be, ooh, sexy time is happening tonight. That doesn't have to necessarily mean that it's literally going to be sex. That might be, we know that we do a date night every Thursday. And sometimes the date night leads to sex. Sometimes it might just lead to us cuddling on the couch, but there's still some intimacy. There's still some intentional time, right? I think that can also be really important for around like expectations around sex. Some people might assume like, oh, once we live together, we're married now, we about to have sex all the time. I've heard it don't work like that. I don't know, I'm not married, but I have heard it don't work like that, because when kids come into play or when real life sets in and you are working every day, tired, thinking about, again, bills, who's doing what, did you go get the, we needed laundry detergent, did you go to the grocery store today? No, I forgot. Oh, did you get the Cheez-Its? Oh, the kids have field day tomorrow. Like sex is just not always on the forefront of your mind. And so scheduling it, I know it may sound boring, but that doesn't mean the sex itself is boring. It just means that you're putting it on the calendar to make sure that you're intentional about it happening. So thank you for sharing that, because I've definitely had people say that too. I can understand, because it feels like homework, right? I'm responding to I wanted to read a book about communication with my partner and have check-ins on a regular basis. I think it was too much for her to wrap her mind around, and she didn't want to do the work. And I think some of it is relationships at work, and it takes that sometimes, and learning someone else is work, right? And so if she was in a space of like, oh, that's too much, that's unfortunate, right? Because it's not that you're trying to be like, oh, we need to do this and like make a homework. It's like, I'm trying to get to know you better. I'm trying to understand, like our communication maybe is not the best. Let's do something together that helps us be closer. We can make it a book club, right? It doesn't have to be like this strenuous, stressful, like, strict thing. It could be like, I want to read this book with you. A book that I typically recommend for couples is The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. I like that book because it has like quizzes in there. It has activities, things that you can do. It's broken up into like different, it's written by John Gottman, who's like a big researcher around like relationships and marriage. And he talks about like a sound relationship house. So like the house being, the pillars are like trust and communication. And then like inside the house, there's like 7 different levels. And for each one, he'll do like an assessment piece, and it'll provide like different things of like, how can we improve on this area? I don't remember all 7 right now, but like the first one is like love maps. Like how do you like really get to know your partner? And the love maps kind of signify like even when you're not with your partner, but you notice something that like reminds you of them, like that can be a point of connection, right? Or like, hey babe, I know you know, when you grew up, you loved the Tweety Bird popsicles. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. I saw a thing of Tweety Bird the other day. It made me think of you. Like those can be points of connection where it's little small stuff, but the more that you know about your partner, the more that, you know, you're bringing them into your world and you can have those conversations. So I definitely understand that. I work for myself. I still be running. Oh yeah, I work for myself too, and I cannot. And I work from home, so sometimes I'm like, Jordan, what do you have to complain about? And I don't work on Fridays, so well, I don't see clients on Fridays. I'm supposed to do all the like business work on Fridays. Does it get done? It depends on the week, but yeah, each work environment is different, and it still comes with its own stressors. I mean, corporate definitely sounds like it comes with way more stressors that I probably wouldn't like, but each work environment definitely comes with its own stressors. And so that scheduling may look different, right? Realizing that your routine between you and your partner may look different too. I've had some people who were like, oh, like waking up at 5 a.m. is the cheat code. That doesn't work for me. That I'm never gonna do that unless I'm catching a flight. I don't see why I'm up before the sun is. I don't like that. So for me, waking up early is like 8 because my first client is not till 11. So if I'm waking up at 8, I'm like, oh, I have a slow morning. I could go work out. Like, but that's different, right? Someone else is like, oh, I'm in bed by 9. I could never be in bed by 9 because I'm not done work until 7. And so then I gotta mindlessly scroll on Instagram to decompress. Then I gotta cook. Then I gotta wash the dishes. Then I gotta bathe. Like it's too much. So I have to like you just have to realize that like certain routines or what people suggest, like it might work for you and your partner, it might not, and that's okay. So thank you for sharing that. And I think scheduling things does not make it bad. Not unless I'm coming in from the club. See, I don't even feel like I want to do that because the club don't even feel it. But yeah, waking up at 5, like again, unless I am catching a flight to a tropical vacation, I don't understand why I would be doing that. This next slide just talks about my jam method. I've been hosting jam sessions where I do journaling. Then I do some affirmations. I provide people with like a little cute affirmation jar. Oh my gosh, you wake up at 5 every morning without an alarm. That's amazing. So what time do you go to sleep? You go to sleep at 9? Wow. See, but then that's 8 hours. Yeah, that's admirable. I wish it could not be me, but I think that that's great. Yeah, I almost never saw clients before 11. Yeah, see, yeah, and on Mondays I don't start till 12. I give myself an extra hour just in case I decide to do something fun on the weekend. So, I definitely understand. So with my jam method, typically in workshops I do journaling and then I do affirmations and then the mindfulness is like the meditation and then yoga. We're not doing all of that tonight, but the journaling piece I will provide a few questions. We've been a chatty bunch today and I'm really appreciating that. So if you feel comfortable, you can put it in the chat or they can be questions that, you know, you can share with your partner later. You can write it down for them to respond to. The affirmations are just reminders of like to yourself that you're deserving and capable. And then also ways that you can affirm your partner as well. And there's an exercise for that I'll get into. And then the last one is just the mindfulness. It won't be necessarily like yoga. I mean, you could do partners yoga, that's fun. But it can be just, I'm providing just some examples, some exercises of ways that you can be mindful with your partner. So yeah, so journaling prompt wise, we don't have to go through and answer all of these tonight at all, to respect time, but you can just write them down maybe, or put them in your phone, and then come back to them at a later time. First one is, what fears or vulnerabilities do I have around intimacy and how can I begin to address them? I think, again, we assume that like, oh, I'm fine with intimacy, that's not a big deal. And having to realize that there might be some areas where you're not always comfortable being vulnerable. And maybe how you can address them is like to admit it to yourself first, right? Maybe how you address it is having a conversation with someone who hurt you in the past. not to reconnect or rekindle, but just to be like, this really scared me, or I never conquered my fear of this, and now I'm like coming to you and stating this is what it was. Or it might be stuff that's rooted in childhood. It might be fear of like, I'm gonna be alone, so I'd rather just stay single because at least then I'm prepared to be alone. Versus what if I fall for someone and then I'm hurt, right? It might be you have a partner and you're still worried, like, what if she'll leave me? Even though there hasn't been any reason for that, right? But it might be a fear from childhood, right? So, just to think about, fears or vulnerabilities that you do have around intimacy. If there's anything that you do feel comfortable putting in the chat, like I said, you can, but do not feel pressured to do so. Next question that I think, or next journal prompt that I think is really helpful is like, what unspoken expectations do I have in my relationship, and how can I express them clearly? And I highlight that because the unspoken expectation part is really important. I think sometimes we have expectations of people that we just assume are a given, and for our partner it may not be, right? And I also tell clients, how you expected or what you expected of someone as your girlfriend versus your fiance versus your wife might look really different, right? Or what your expectations are of like how we were as a couple, not living together, and then now we do live together, and then now we have a kid together, right? Like those expectations change, right? And so there might be some unspoken expectations. Maybe it's trying to think of any recent examples I've seen. I had a couple recently where that was maybe not the best example because that was a really interesting situation. But let's say the principal idea was like one band, one sound, right? Me and my wife are one band, one sound. So if you don't talk to me, that means you don't talk to my wife. Principle wise makes sense. Me personally, I was like, okay, that's a little bit much, but fair, right? Maybe for someone else. But that was like an unspoken expectation, right? So his wife talking to somebody, she's not thinking about it. She didn't know that he was expecting, like, well, if you didn't say hi to me, I think that's rude. Or, I mean, again, the situation was a little more complex, but principle piece, right? Sometimes what we view as a principle or what we view as like common sense may not be common sense for our partner. And so thinking of like, are there any unspoken expectations that I have? Maybe I expect my partner to always choose me over their friends, right? And I'm not saying that these expectations have to be like right or wrong. I want you to consider like, are there expectations that you might have of a partner that might be unspoken? Or to be fair, now that I think about it, what are expectations that you have of yourself as a partner, right? Because you might have seen family or past relationships where it's like, okay, a partner always does this. So like I have to always have food ready, or I have to always let my partner know where I'm going, right? That may not be a bad expectation. It might be like, we're like, I want to communicate where I'm at because anything can happen and this world's crazy, right? But for your partner, that might not be an expectation that they have. So just to think of like, what are some unspoken expectations of yourself and of your partner in relationship, and how can you, express them clearly. And then last but not least, the last journal prompt is, what are some recurring communication patterns in my relationship that might be hindering intimacy, and how can I break them? That can be, I had a couple today. They always argue about one of the partner's brothers. So that's a recurring communication problem. I don't know what that brother did, but but for them, it's always an argument for them both, right? One partner feels like, well, it's my brother, like it's my brother, I'm always gonna love him. Like we gotta figure it out. He's gonna be there, The other partner feels like I don't want him to take advantage of me, right? So like that's a communication pattern that's like hindering their intimacy. That can be a specific one. Maybe a communication pattern looks like, when I'm angry, I shut down because I don't want to say something I regret, but me shutting down is what hinders the intimacy. Or maybe I'm angry for an hour, but I don't reach back out to my partner until 2 days from now, because I want them to know how mad I am, or I want them to receive the silent treatment, right? Like, just what are some patterns that you might be noticing that hinder intimacy, and then how can we break them? Affirmations, this is just a short list, right? Some that you can say for yourself, some that you can say for your partner, or that you can tell your partner. Yeah, I'm loved, I'm deserving of healthy relationships, I'm able to communicate effectively. You know, all of these can be examples of like, these are things that I'm affirming, or that I'm either already doing, or that I can continue to do. For your partner, it can be reminding them like, you're seen, you're valued, I see what you bring to this relationship, I value it. We will continue to grow and learn together. We're able to, you know, make choices that make this relationship what we envision. Our relationship will be a healthy example for others. Like, these are things that you can definitely, oh, I love that. You know, say to your partner, say to, yeah, your child, that's a great example, right? Because your child needs to be seen and reminded that they're valued. Your relationship with your daughter can be a really healthy example for others, right? So I put it for your partner for the sake of just this workshop, but I think that's a great point. Like, it does not just have to be for your partner. And affirmations don't just have to be for your partner in general, right? We can affirm our family members, we can affirm our children. Children need, you know, to hear those things. They need to be reminded and heard that they are loved, they are seen, that they matter, that they are important, special, all of the things. Um, the other part of affirmations that I think is really cool is like creating a relationship mission statement. I've done this with some couples before. These are a few questions. I would suggest, I'll just leave it up so you can write it down or take a picture of it, whatever is easiest. Because after you answer the questions, you can have a little like mission statement, right? Like, what makes, and now that I say that, to be fair, I think you can also do this with your daughter, right? Like, what makes our relationship special, right? What do we promise? What do we want to achieve, right? What do we promise not to do? What do we want, you know, when we're angry? Some people might be like, we promise to never go to bed angry or whatever. That might not be realistic, but it might be, we promise to not leave the house without at least saying I love you, even if we are upset with each other, right? Or we promise to use our differences to strengthen the relationship, right? Or, you know, what is it that we want to accomplish and create together? We want to show the world that we can create an extremely loving family and raise children that come from a loving home and know that they are loved and special. We want to show our kids that we want to be the parents that are always touching each other and kissing on each other in front of our kids, and our kids think that we're annoying, but like, we never lose that spark. Whatever. Whatever it may be. Yeah, the not to go to bed angry, I don't know how realistic that one is. But you know, maybe it's like, we promise to never like, or maybe not never, because I think never is too harsh of a word. But again, when we're gonna take a break from being in each other's space, or we may say like, we will not curse at each other, right? Or we will never call each other out of each other's name. We might get angry, we might say F this, but we're never gonna say F you, right? Like, maybe there's different ways. Of the idea of this for parents and children. Yeah, that literally just came to me because of what you said. I think it's a phenomenal idea. Because yeah, like, why not do this with your kids too, right? And for kids, I think because their stages of growth will just be different. You could start as young kids. You can do a new mission statement when they're teenagers, right? You could, I think that'd be really cool. You could do one, okay, you're going away to college. What's our mission statement now that you're not in the house? But like, what does our relationship look like, right? I think that's a great idea. So I love that. And then last but not least, sorry, can't remember if you guys usually stick to an hour, so apologies for going over it a little bit. Some examples of mindfulness are, I know it sounds corny, but staring into each other's eyes. I try to make clients do this at the end of session. Especially if it's been a tense session, I always feel bad, like, yikes, y'all are mad at each other and I'm about to just hang up and go about my day, but y'all have to like still see each other. So I try to end note sessions on like a, oh, okay, great, Mr. Knight. I try to end sessions on a positive note. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. But staring into each other's eyes is always a good one. I like to do it, especially with parents. I've done it with parents, and it really makes them slow down and see their partner. And then I'll ask, like, what did you notice? Or how was that? And it's like, oh, I haven't seen her today. Like, I just noticed this thing on her face. Or, oh, he hasn't looked at me in this way in a while. Like, it's been really interesting to see. So I really like staring into each other's eyes. Mindful breathing together, I think can be really cool. It might be the hopeless romantic in me. I remember like watching and reading something where it was like, like our breaths matched, right? But I think it's really cool when you can sync your breath with someone. And so when you're mindfully breathing without any distractions and just like inhaling and exhaling at the same time, or maybe you guys are like, you picked an affirmation to say in your mind. So you inhale on we are and you exhale on whatever. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. But I think the breathing together can be really helpful because controlling our breath can be really regulating for our nervous system. And so when you do that with a partner, that can be really helpful too, right? Because it's like you guys are syncing up in a sense. Practicing gratitude, I think, can be really helpful. Again, I've had couples say like, I'll ask couples, what did you appreciate that your partner did this past week? Or what did you notice that they did, or what were you grateful for? I've seen some people like, keep a gratitude journal. Maybe, we write what we're grateful for each other and we share it, or we keep it in the same book and we take turns, or we write each other letters about whatever. Like, I think that can be a way to come together, or just answer the question separately, but then like leave a love note for your partner to know, like, this is, important to me, or like, I noticed this thing that you did. I really appreciate it. I see you. I'm appreciative of you. Because I think a lot of times with couples, the tension to me is like, I don't feel seen for what I do. And both partners are feeling that way. And then it's like, oh, I'm ignoring it. Like, I'm not hearing what you have to say because you're not hearing what I have to say. And I mean, we're human and we're petty. I think that's like human nature. So it just, a lot can go a long way when you are feeling more, when you're showing that gratitude to a partner. Partnered yoga, I think, can be another way to regulate the nervous system. It can be a form of physical touch. It can also be a way of working out together. It can be a lot of different poses that you do. It could be literally you both just doing yoga together, but like your own flow. There are some poses that sometimes are good for like couple stretching, like maybe it's like you open your legs wide. I don't know, this is gonna sound crazy, but you like open your legs wide and you like, pull each other and you stretch that way, or that can be one. I've seen like couple like do twists together, and that can be a really cool one as well. And you like sit back to back and you twist, and you touch your partner's leg or whatever the case may be. So those can be ways, again, of like, being mindful, spending that time together, focusing on the present moment. A mindful massage can be helpful. I think that's a way of physical touch, but it also can slow things down. It can also build intimacy without it necessarily leading to sex. It might lead to sex, it might not. But the point is like, how can we just like be one with each other, focus on our bodies, focus on the sensations, right? Maybe it's like, I've been really stressed, or I hold tension in my neck or in my shoulders, right? And like allowing your partner to feel that tension, right? Maybe it feels good to help, relieve stress from your partner. Maybe it's like, I really like physical touch and I've missed being touched. So this massage is really helpful for me. Like, whatever it may look like, that can be a way to just be mindful. I love that. Yeah. And hopefully she loves it too. I hope she enjoys it. But yeah, and then last but not least, I would say a body scan can be another way of mindfulness. To me, it's a way to check in with yourself. You could listen to like a body scan meditation and do it with your partner and then ask like what they notice, or you can both like you read the body scan meditation while they do it, and then you switch. That can be another way as well. But body scans to me can be really helpful in just noticing our bodies. So often we're like in our body, we like, we live in it all day, but do we really notice like how we're feeling, or like where there's tension, or like, do we need to like, loosen our jaw? Do we need to roll our shoulders out? Like, and so the body scan helps you to just be more mindful about like where you're feeling stuff in your body and what you're needing. So I think that's really helpful as well. I think that was it. Yeah, that's all I had for today. We have a few minutes, so if there's any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to let me know. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed and got something out of this workshop. And like I said, I have sent some worksheets and things that you can have as like take home from the workshop as well.
Yep, thank you so much, Jordan. So yes, when I send the recording, I will send over the worksheets, and all the link. I tried to take note of the books that you mentioned, but you sheets as well. So that was actually my question. What if my partner, after many years, my wife just agreed to go to a sound bath with me. She was like, for you. But I also want to know is I don't want it for me. But anyway, I kind of answered my question for me. I don't want it to seem like it's too much. If I would like to practice mindfulness with her, I'm like, okay, you gave me these suggestions. Do you agree that it's okay to just slowly introduce them?
Uh, yeah, and I think people have ideas of what mindfulness is before trying it, that they're like, I don't want to do that. I can't empty my mind. I don't know. Like, I don't want to be mindful. A sound bath could be cool and she might enjoy it, right? You might be like, oh, babe, I want to give you a massage. And she might be like, oh, like, there's so many different ways to be mindful. Mindfulness can look like mindful eating. Like, we ate dinner without any TV in the background and we just like really noticed the flavor of the food, or I don't know. It could be a walk. We go for a walk in nature. Like, mindfulness doesn't always have to look like shit. Like, yeah, see, people grow, so and I think that's the cool thing, right? You mentioned like 14 years, that's a long time to be with someone, right? That's beautiful. And so you both have probably grown from who you were when you first started dating versus who you are now. You might have grown once kids came into the mix, and so noticing like how can we like still spend time to get to know each other. What are things that like maybe we can try, that don't have to be, it might be like, let's go to a painting class, let's do something that's new, for the both of us. Or it might be like, all right, I'm gonna take you to the sound bath, I know you don't want to go, but I want you to do it, and then you get to pick something that I might not want to do, but I'll come with you and do it, like it can be fun. Doesn't have to,
I love
look at
that. Like, okay, this is my date. Like we plan dates. I'm like, okay, next one's your turn. So she planned one. She already put it in the calendar. But it's so bad. I have access to her email. I'm trying not to look. I promise you. Don't judge me, y'all. I'm trying not to look. But I'm excited.
like, but what it is.
Yes. Oh, so did someone come off mute? Sorry. Okay, cool. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, we have about like 2 or 3 more minutes if you would like to ask. All right. If not, Jordan, thank you so much for this. We have the recording. It's definitely something that I'm going to refer back to. And I do have the books and I'm also thinking like this is great for like when couples get engaged. If you like to give them like, instead of flowers, you can give them one of the books, something that's actually that could be meaningful. It may not be meaningful for them, but that could be potentially. So thank you so much for these resources. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I will also put in, I have, I forget that I wrote this book. But I have a book called the CBT Journal for Mental Health, um, which has affirmations, mindfulness exercises, um, journal prompts, all the things that we kind of did today. It doesn't solely focus on relationships. It's a little more like internal, but you can definitely, there are some relationship questions in there as well. So hopefully that can be another resource.
Okay, just put in that chat. Not you saying I forget I wrote this book.
No, I do. I know it's really bad. But yeah, like I hope that this can be helpful, that this presentation can be a resource, just give you things to think about, but also can be like self-reflective as well. Going over the journal prompts or going over some of these things with your partner, with yourself, with a friend, doesn't always have to be romantic. It can be helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, and thank you for giving us your time. Hopefully you can mindlessly scroll on Instagram now before so you can relax. You got one more day of your work week, as you mentioned. And everyone, thank you for joining and staying on. Because I know this was an hour and a half. We're used to 1 hour workshops, but I figured if we were interacting, doing journal prompts and things like
Yeah,
that, we need a little bit extra time. All right, so everyone enjoy your week. Jordan, thank you again. We'll talk soon, okay?
no problem. Thanks you so much for having me. I hope you guys enjoy your night as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.